and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Do you feel as if you don't belong? Do you know you were meant for something more? Well, you were. Knowledge of who you are and where you really are from is within your reach. Join Janet Carol Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin as they search for the answers as they open up the Stargate to the cosmos.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker. And our special guest today is Dr. Michael Salla. And as you know, Dr. Michael Salla is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the political study of the key actors, institutions, and processes associated with extraterrestrial life. And we are going to be talking about a couple of things here. There's a new article that Dr. Salla has about Above Majestic producer reveals secret space program disclosure and document dumps imminent. So we'll talk about what that means. And Dr. Lessin and I are watching Above Majestic, a new movie. Above Majestic producer reveals. Yeah, it's the same thing. So we are going to be talking about those and many other things. And Dr. Lessin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think it's really interesting. There's a concept in thinking called Occam's razor. Whatever set of integers, and thoughts or numbers or words you can use that can help you sort of comprehend all the data, not leave out a lot of things, and leads you to predictions that you can then verify that you were right or not right, is the one to hang on to, but not hang on to it forever. And so Michael has brought us a long way along the path of understanding what's going on. And the evidence that he cites account for the data pretty damn well. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Yeah, welcome back.
Very happy to be here. Thanks, Janet.
Well, thank you. And okay, so when did they begin production on this movie? And I know you're in it. And what is your role in this? I know you were talking to Bill Tompkins before he passed, and that was what, in July of 2017, correct? When Tompkins was at the MUFON conference, and you guys all started connecting and working together. Is this like, was that something that prompted this, or was this in the works before that, this new movie? And then you have these revelations. Go ahead.
Yes, there were a set of interviews that happened at that MUFON conference, and Bill Tompkins was interviewed, as was I, as was Bob Wood. And over time, those interviews kind of like evolved into this movie, and you had other people coming in, like of course David Wilcock and Jordan Sater, who did the interviews. He was in it as well. And so, it kind of like just evolved out of those early interviews that arose at that MUFON conference, which was really the last major public event that Bill Tompkins attended, because soon after that he died in an unexpected way. And he was quite advanced in years, but nevertheless, it was still a shock because he seemed to be in such good health, and he was really looking forward to putting out new material. He was working on the second volume of his memoirs. He was definitely planning to be around for some time, and really just enjoying talking about the things that he's seen. And of course now he's gone, and so these interviews that were done at that MUFON conference were kind of like a legacy, like the last opportunity for people to see Bill Tompkins, and so the movie evolved out of that.
Yeah, I was there. I had the table right across from Bill, and I hung out with him and his lovely wife for a while there. And he did seem very healthy. There was one point where I had to help him and his wife get across the whole casino and hotel to the panel, because he was running late for the panel. And so I took his wheelchair with his wife, and then I looked over, and we had to run because it was so far away. And there he was, 93. He was running and keeping up with me. And so I would agree he was in very good health for 93. And I was shocked to hear of his death. And I always wondered if it was foul play, because, of course, anybody that dies in this UFO field, we think it's foul play. But I don't know. I just let that go. But I was delighted that he, everybody got to film him, and that he's on this video. So what is the premise of this, if you could tell our listeners what this Above Majestic is about?
Well, Majestic, the term itself, it relates to Operation Majestic, which was the name of the program that was established in 1947 dealing with the whole extraterrestrial topic. And so any subject related to extraterrestrial life, UFOs, it came under that rubric of the Majestic program. The Majestic documents is an example of a set of documents that deal with this subject matter. So Above Majestic was just really showing that we're talking about levels of classification. We're talking about Majestic documents and the Majestic projects. They had a particular set of classification markings. The first one actually that was used was called Magic. So originally, any topic that dealt with extraterrestrial life at the very beginning began with the term magic, and then you had other terms coming in like ultra, cosmic, and so you've had a whole set of additional terms. So Above Majestic is just really referring to even a deeper level of classification or a higher level of classification, which really is kind of like a more deeply embedded or hidden set of compartmentalized programs dealing with these secret space programs. Because, you might be cleared to know about, recovered alien craft that's being held at Area 51, but just because you're cleared to know or have access to Area 51 and the S4 facility doesn't mean you're going to have clearance to know about these secret Navy spacecraft that are kilometers long that operate in deep space. So Above Majestic really is kind of referring to that level of classification, which is even beyond that very high level ascribed to extraterrestrial related projects.
Mm-hmm. Sasha, we're going to go back and forth. Do you have a question or comment?
Well, it's just it was apparent to me that at that MOFON conference that the establishment wanted to shush Bill Tompkins up, especially when he started to talk about the spiritual aspect of his work and the communication that he was getting from the Viril assistants. That was the information that he got telepathically that allowed him to solve many things. And he insisted, despite all the efforts of Mr. Dolan and the moderator to shush him up, he insisted on telling the truth, that this all has a spiritual dimension. And I could just feel his goodness.
Well, that's right. Yes, Bill was really a kind of one of those wise elders that had been around since the 1940s. That had experience, had grown up with all of this. He saw this. Actually, he was one of the people that was involved from the very beginning with the Los Angeles air raid when they first recovered extraterrestrial craft, and then the Navy was in the thick of all of this. So he was there from the beginning, one of the few remaining kind of veterans that was there to kind of oversee all of this. So, so he had plenty of time to kind of evolve and grow. And at the end, just as you said, Sasha, I mean, he was bringing in a much more kind of spiritual understanding of what was going on. Talking about the big picture. And I think there were people that were very uncomfortable with Bill Tompkins, with his testimony, and I think there were efforts to kind of like shut him down, which I really don't know. I have no evidence that his death was in any way contrived, but certainly I have my suspicions because he was very healthy and he was full of zest and looking forward to, talking more and revealing more about what was going on. So, it really did take us all by surprise and kind of shut down a voice that had a lot of authority because he did have a lot of documentation to support the things that he knew. And he knew about the many companies that were involved at the foundation level with these whole topics. So, he was a very important person, but, I'm quite happy to have met him on a number of occasions and to have worked closely with him. I interviewed him extensively by phone as well as in person and on video. And my second Secret Space Program book was based on Bill's testimony. So, apart from Bill's own book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, I would definitely recommend my own book, The U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program, as really being a way for people to really come to grips with, the full extent of Bill Tompkins' rich testimony and, what it meant for the planet.
And I also want to go back to Bill, and I want to talk about what he was talking about the reptilians, because he started to touch on that. But I want to Do you know how far this goes back? We were talking to Cynthia Crawford, and she was saying how she was a clone. Her dad worked in a ship that was involved with the cloning project, and she was impregnated she was put into her mother's womb, actually outside of the womb, alongside her sister, so she was a twin, and she was a hybrid that they implanted into the mother, and her father participated in this program. But one of the things she said was her father was a clone as well, and we figured out that her father was a contemporary of my father and Sasha's father, and our fathers were all born in 1920. So how far can we go back with this modern secret space program? Because that puts it back to the early 1900s in 1920. But I think a lot of the people are saying about the what happened in World War II, which is 39 or 40s. But what are you finding? How far back does this go?
Okay, well, when we're talking about the secret space programs, I like to begin with the Maria Orsic and the Vril Society, because that's the first documented case we have of an attempt to build anti-gravity spacecraft, and these evolved into the Vril craft. And I suspect very strongly that the 1933 crash of a UFO in northern Italy involved a Vril craft. And so then you had the Italians becoming very interested in the flying saucer phenomenon, and Giuliano Marconi was brought in to that. So definitely, I would say the early 1920s with the Vril Society, the Fool Society in Germany. That was when they began building secret spacecraft, or at least getting the instructions for how to build these craft. And then by the 30s, the Germans made a lot of advances. Hitler came on the scene. And then in 1942, you had the Los Angeles air raid. And that was by no means the beginning of the secret space program. What I think it was basically an intervention by Nordic extraterrestrials, and this is something Bill Tompkins emphasized as well. It was an intervention by Nordic extraterrestrials to kind of like wake up the US military-industrial complex, to let them know that the planet was being visited by advanced extraterrestrials, that the Germans had basically gone far ahead in understanding these technologies, and that the US better start catching up, because if they don't, they're going to have big problems in the future. So I think it was a big wake-up call, and by the time the US did wake up to the seriousness and the kind of impact of these advanced technologies, the Germans had already established their Antarctic facilities and had come within a whisker of weaponizing their craft for the war effort. If the war had lasted another 6 months, you probably would have had a different outcome. That's because the Germans were so close to successfully weaponizing their flying saucer craft for the war effort. But, that didn't happen. But nevertheless, by the time Admiral Byrd and the US Navy got down to Antarctica at the end of 1946, beginning of 1947, the Germans were ready for them.
So you're saying this 1933 crash? What I've learned from interviewing a lot of people, and this is just a theory, but a hypothesis, that there really are no crashes. That these are like intervention. They're intentionally delivered so that we would start to be aware of these extraterrestrials and perhaps start reverse engineering. So I don't know. I think that there's an element of truth in that. So I'm looking online here. So Mussolini, apparently the UFO Milan. I'll have to research this 1933 crash. What makes them think it's a crash? Just because it fell to the ground, or I don't have the details behind that.
Sure. Well, there were actually documents. These were documents, official documents from the government at the time, which was the fascist government of Benito Mussolini, which was reporting on the crash in Modena, which is kind of somewhere near Milan, in Italy, and basically described the recovery of a flying saucer. And then it described the creation of a committee that would investigate this phenomenon. And Guglielmo Marconi was appointed to head up this committee. And the reason Marconi was asked to head up this committee was, of course, because he was the founder of radio waves and a very famous inventor. But probably the main reason he was chosen was because he actually, through wireless radio, began communicating with extraterrestrials. He was, along with Nikola Tesla, the first person that actually began communicating with extraterrestrials. So Mussolini chose him to head up this committee. So, you have these documents which have been authenticated as genuine national documents, Italian documents, that actually dealt with the Italians' recovery of a flying saucer in 1933 and the creation of a committee headed by Marconi to basically investigate this phenomenon. And interestingly, how the documents say how Mussolini was very concerned about making sure that none of this information was shared with the Vatican. I think Mussolini wanted to kind of use it as a bargaining chip with the Vatican. So, that was a very important part of this.
So was Mussolini communicating with the same extraterrestrials that Tesla was? Have any idea?
That I don't know exactly whose craft it was. As I mentioned, it may have been a craft belonging to the Brill Society. It may have been a genuine extraterrestrial craft, in which case, this was probably an effort to kind of like get the Italians to start going down this effort, a positive group. And we can speculate here because I think it's worth understanding that Marconi was very much a humanitarian or a philanthropist. He was someone that really tried to help humanity advance, and I think he was someone that was not very impressed with the fascist policies of Mussolini, especially with the alliance with Germany. I think as Italy started to go down the path of aligning itself more and more with Germany, I think he was very, very upset with that. And so in 1937, he faced his death. There's a lot of people that believe that this is what happened, that Marconi faked his death. And I think, if that's what happened, and I think it did happen, then we could say that probably the 1933 crash basically was an intervention by a positive group of extraterrestrials that were in communication with Marconi, that basically landed a craft and said, here you are, work with this craft. And Marconi began working with that craft, with the support of Mussolini and the Italian government. And then by 1937, Marconi realized what was going to happen with the fascists aligning with the Nazis. And so he faked his death and basically took everything with him to South America. And that's where he set up this civilian space program featuring scientists in the jungles of South America. Where exactly, I'm not sure. Could have been Colombia, could have been Venezuela, Ecuador, any of those countries. And, there are people that have put forth these rumors. But, this is one of those. And Bill Tompkins actually did say, again, Bill was a wealth of information. He said that the Italians in that early period had a massive secret space program. So I think from the time Marconi began his communications with the positive extraterrestrials, when they got that craft, up until 1937 when he faked his death, that's when the Italians built up this massive program. And Marconi basically took a lot with him to South America. And then what survived in Italy basically carried over into the Second World War with the alliance with the Germans, where the Germans and the Italians were trying to weaponize these flying saucer craft. And that's been documented. People like Giuseppe Belluzzo, a high-level official within the Italian bureaucracy and within the Italian Senate, actually has confirmed that, yes, Italy and Germany did collaborate on developing flying saucer prototypes for the war effort. So that's documented.
Excellent. Sasha, your turn.
Yeah, I have some questions about, in the film part that I did watch, it was said like Eisenhower, first of all, brought these Nazis and Nazi sympathizers, Allen Dulles, to run the CIA, and John Foster Dulles, as Secretary of State, these pro-Nazi dudes that brought in people by paperclip. And then toward the end of his tenure, when Ike said, "I want to see what you got on the alien thing," and he was denied access, Corey Goode says he was willing to invade the restricted areas using the U.S. Army. He would not be put off anymore. That was an amazing revelation, and I just don't understand how Ike went for these Nazis after fighting the whole World War II against them. Could you elucidate that some?
Sure. Well, that's actually a very important part of American history. Why did the Eisenhower administration choose to reach these agreements with the Germans and basically allowed the Germans to infiltrate the U.S. military-industrial complex through all of these paperclip scientists? And there were thousands of them brought in from Germany, and they were put into very senior positions. We're not just talking about German scientists coming in to basically give Americans a hand in understanding, the B-2 rockets and some of the other advanced German aerospace programs, because the United States had its own very kind of talented rocket scientists, Robert Goddard, for example, and many others that understood these principles. But these Germans were put into leadership positions, basically they, running NASA and so forth. So, what was really going on? And, I think when we look at it closely, what we see is that agreements had been reached between the Eisenhower administration and the Germans in Antarctica, because the Germans began doing overflights of the United States as early as 1947. This dates back to Operation High Jump and to Admiral Byrd basically, taking a naval task force down to Antarctica and basically suffering a heavy defeat by the Germans down there. And then on his way back to the United States, he said that the United States needs to be prepared for a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole. And so he was talking about the Germans. And so the Germans began doing overflights of the US, and because they had successfully weaponized their flying saucers, the most advanced US jet craft of the time, didn't have a chance against these Nazi flying saucers. So they were being shot down. This is one of the things that's been covered up, that from 1947 right up until the early 1950s, there were many cases where these German and extraterrestrial craft, because they were both, flying over the US territory, and US jets were sent up to intercept them and shoot them down. And when they did try to shoot them down, the German or the extraterrestrial craft would respond and shoot down the American craft. So that happened on many occasions. So by the time President Eisenhower gets elected, he decided that it was best to make a deal with the Germans because there was no way that the US military was going to kind of bridge the gap, the technological gap with the Germans in Antarctica, because they just become too advanced. I mean, the best example of this was the 1952 Washington overflights, where you had these squadrons of flying saucers going over Washington, D.C. on successive weekends, and in July, nothing could touch them. So basically, it was decided that making a deal with the Germans was the best thing to try and help the US bridge the technological gap and understand the extraterrestrial technologies, because the Germans had gotten help in understanding the extraterrestrial technologies because they made deals with the reptilians, but the US, they didn't have a deal with any extraterrestrial group, and so they needed to understand the advanced technologies, and they got their hands on some of these. The grey craft, like in 1947, the Roswell craft, but they couldn't understand, the principles behind them. They didn't understand the kind of like fiber optic, communication system in the craft. They didn't understand the navigation or the propulsion. So they needed help in all of that. So they thought that through an agreement with the Germans, they would get help, and that's what happened.
So are we basically like a conquered nation? What better way to conquer than just through administration? We had 10,000 German scientists come into high level positions, and then they had all their families. So how many descendants of those original Germans are here in the United States in key positions? Is that what's really going on? We're kind of a colony of the Germans now? I'm getting this correctly.
Yes, I would say it was a covert takeover. So it wasn't in any way overt where the general public, would be shocked to learn that there's Germans in charge of these things. But where the Germans were in charge, the public was just told that these were really talented guys. That there's nothing wrong with Werner von Braun being in charge of the Marshall Space Flight Center, that was basically running the Apollo program. There was nothing wrong with Dr. Kurt Debus, running the Kennedy Space Center, that was basically launching the Gemini and the Apollo programs. The public was kind of hoodwinked into thinking that, there was nothing wrong with these Germans running the, premier space programs. But in fact, these were the kind of most overt signs that there had been a covert takeover, that the Apollo program and the Gemini programs were really covers for the German takeover. And so that's what happened. It was a kind of covert takeover. And President Eisenhower kind of like resented that. That he thought it would be something that that would be more of an equal relationship. But by 1958, after the agreements were reached in the mid-50s, by 1958, Eisenhower realized that the agreements were not leading to the information being shared with the U.S. military and the presidency as he was persuaded. What was basically happening was that the Germans were benefiting, through the agreements, and so essentially Eisenhower threatened to invade Area 51, as you mentioned earlier, that this was a threat Eisenhower had to make in order to be given access to the information that was being kept from him, because the CIA was working with major U.S. corporations in basically hoarding this information and making less and less available to the U.S. military and to the U.S. presidency, because in a high tech or in a kind of like highly industrialized state, kind of information is power, and so those that control the information have the power. So if you restrict information, then you basically are able to manipulate decisions and the policy-making process. So Eisenhower knew this, and he fought it, and he enjoyed the temporary success, but it was short-lived because after Kennedy came on the scene, then Kennedy was basically cut out of the loop altogether, and because Kennedy fought tooth and nail to be given access to this information, ultimately they decided, and here we're talking about the Majestic 12 group and the Germans that they were working with, decided that Kennedy had to go.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You know, I was in the 80s, I worked at a motion picture lab, and part of it was these secret military films, and they were working to preserve them. But while I was working there, there was a Nazi. He had been recruited from, I think it was Venezuela, and so he and his family were. He was like number 2 in this motion picture lab, WRS motion picture labs in Pittsburgh. And now looking back on it, it's like, oh my God, this is part of that paperclip. So there was that first generation that came right after World War II, but he was recruited. He came up in like 62, 63, and he was put in a lead position in a motion picture lab, which was making copies or preserving these films that were gathered, that were top secret. And so my husband at the time, he had some clearance to destroy some of them. Some of them had to be destroyed. So this is really weird. So that's just a personal note. I know this makes sense, but so the Nazis were here, and I kept wondering, why does this guy, a Nazi, have such a high position in this organization? But that's part of it. It kept going. It wasn't just the original 10,000 families. It was they kept bringing them in. So, okay, so, Sash, and you got a nice rooster. We got rid of our roosters. For listeners out there, the Hawaiian Islands are just polluted with chickens, and they crow all day long. They have no manners. They just crow when they want to. But, Sasha, go ahead.
One of the interesting things that Donald Ware, Colonel Ware, and others have talked to me about is the works of Leach on that there's more to the Antarctica or the inner Earth story than Corey Goode has at least told us in the parts of the film that I've been able to look. But what's raised by all of this talk of other groups like the Bodlanders and a whole series of organized societies in inner Earth is that the Nazis that were allowed to settle there have been allowed to settle there on the basis of they must live peaceably henceforth, and that the children of the German settlement have been going to the European and Australian, New Zealand, American universities, and even the grandchildren of those Nazis in the military-industrial complex that have done some of those things include decent human beings who have evolved just as we all have, and that maybe it's not just that because people used to be Germans and their grandfathers did terrible things, maybe it ain't a bad thing. Maybe we can all live in peace and help each other.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's something that we really kind of need to clarify is that I believe that there were essentially in Antarctica when the Germans went there during the Second World War. There were two major factions, amongst the Germans. One faction was led by Maria Orsic and the Vril Society. So these were truly very much peace-loving, very interested in cosmic philosophy and kind of friendly relations with advanced extraterrestrial life. And I think that this is a group that probably was welcomed by the inner Earth beings. The other German faction that went down to Antarctica, these were the ones that were kind of like had very strong kind of Nazi ideals, or kind of like they kind of had very hegemonic masculine value systems where It was about conquest. It was about the master race. It was about making subservient peoples, exploiting them. And so you had slave labor in Antarctica. And that this particular group of Germans were being helped by a group of reptilian extraterrestrials to develop these bases in Antarctica where they would go to the stars and basically exploit humans, both on Earth and in deep space. So I think that really when we're looking at the whole German question in Antarctica, there was a positive faction that was working with the Inner Earth group there and with positive extraterrestrial groups in doing really wonderful things to uplift the planet, and then the other group that was really doing dark stuff. Now, as a result of the agreements, I think that you could have had both factions actually having their children going to universities in the United States, in Australia, and Europe, and so forth, and that way having a sharing of cultures and a kind of softening of that very hardcore imperialistic view that maybe the Germans developed, that had this kind of aggressive space program down in Antarctica. But as far as I know, the Germans continue to operate down there. According to Corey Goode, that kind of imperialistic German program, he calls that the Dark Fleet, and the Dark Fleet has been quarantined, from the rest of the galaxy, and apparently a lot of the major space assets of the Dark Fleet were caught outside of a quarantine that was first established by the Sphere-Being Alliance and then taken over by the Galactic Federation. So that means that the groups that remain now have been cut off from their major kind of assets or their major forms of space power. And so they are now making deals. And so this was something that Corey Goode talked about most recently. He had a set of meetings where he said that he got to meet with groups on the moon associated with the Secret Space Program Alliance, where they were basically saying that there was deals that had been reached, that there was a consensus on how to disclose this information to the general public.
Yeah, and we just finished the 2018 Stargate to the Cosmos Expo in Albuquerque, and we had a number of the Secret Space Program people, various, some that were abducted and enlisted against their will, and some that were in command positions. And we were talking to Randy Kramer, and he correlates, his information seems to correlate with that there are some agreements being reached as to how to reveal this information to humanity. And so tell us what Corey says. What's going on from his perspective?
Okay, right. Well, basically what's happened is that this covert takeover of the planet that occurred during the Eisenhower administration had the high-level Germans brought in to head up major corporations, to head up major institutions, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And over time, this has evolved into a control system that was used by the Dark Fleet for basically recruiting personnel and getting resources for their space program, where they would deploy these battle groups in deep space to basically conquer other worlds. And so this was a phenomenon that had been going on for decades. And of course, as I mentioned, you had a blockade that went into effect around early 2015. And so Corey Goode has said that essentially that cut off the Dark Fleet from its major assets in deep space. And so those that were left behind on Earth and on other places like Mars, they've now reached a point where they're having to make deals with the Secret Space Program Alliance. And as they make deals, people are defecting. People are kind of like revealing how the system was set up, the kind of corruption that was enabling the Dark Fleet to be able to accumulate vast resources so that it could build its huge space battle cruisers and space carriers in Antarctica and on Mars. That this was all kind of coming off this international corruption that had been set up using major institutions like the CIA, like the Mossad, like MI6, and so forth. But what Corey Goode has said is that the Dark Fleet, they've reached a point where the assets that had set up this international control system for a covert takeover of the entire planet, that they have defected, and they're now revealing who was doing what, all the human rights abuses, all of the corruption. And so this is why President Trump in December of 2017 issued that executive order basically declaring that a state of national emergency existed in the United States, and that all the assets, all the financial assets of people involved in international corruption and human rights abuses would be confiscated around the world. So this is unprecedented, and basically what that was, the real intent behind that was to confiscate the assets of the, what people call the dark deep state, the cabal, the dark fleet, whatever name you want to give it, but that basically the white hats within the US military-industrial complex, working with white hats within Russia and within China, Brazil, and other countries, that they are trying to basically clean up the international system. And so Corey basically said that he just returned from a trip to the moon, where he said that there has been progress made in the Dark Fleet assets turning states becoming witnesses for the prosecution of others that were involved in this international corruption system, and that we are going to be witnessing kind of document dumps very, very soon. And this is something that is tied in with the whole kind of Q phenomenon, because Q is kind of like, setting up, or has been talking a lot about these sealed indictments, over 60,000 sealed cases, and that when these get unsealed, that you're going to have a lot of people being prosecuted, who are going to reveal the truth, and a lot of documents are going to come out.
So let's look at the cast of characters, the players in this thing. So we're going back.
You actually had mentioned Corey Goode was at a meeting with a fellow named Gonzalez, and that Henry Kissinger was there, and that there was some argument between the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers about indemnity. Could you sort of reflect a little on that for us?
Sure. Well, the most recent meeting, Corey Goode says that he was taken up to the moon, where he had meetings with Sigmund and Gonzalez, where they basically talked about the Dark Fleet and its assets basically being caught, and then turning state's evidence and revealing what's been going on, because it's become clear to the Dark Fleet assets that this solar system-wide quarantine isn't going to lift soon, so there isn't going to be kind of reinforcements coming in. Now, as far as Henry Kissinger is concerned, Corey has talked about meetings he had in 2015 and 2016, where he met with these kind of global elites, Dark Fleet representatives, and where Henry Kissinger was involved in those meetings. And Henry Kissinger basically was and is a spokesperson for the German Draconian Alliance. So Henry Kissinger is someone who is deeply compromised, and Corey says that he saw Kissinger at a meeting involving these Draconian reptilians, and Henry Kissinger was there to kind of like act as a kind of an MC for that encounter. Kissinger is deeply involved in all of this. Now, exactly what is going to happen to Henry Kissinger? Is he going to be one of the people that's prosecuted? I don't know, simply because Kissinger himself has been more a kind of go-between, an intermediary. He's the guy that kind of like shuttles between different presidents, different statesmen, different extraterrestrial groups, delivering messages and so forth. So he's been an intermediary. The real power holders have been people like David Rockefeller, the Rothschild family. These are the ones that have been making the decisions, and of course the Germans that were part of the Dark Fleet.
So I wanted to break down the cast of characters. Can you hear me? I want to break down the cast of characters. We have about 5 minutes before we go to a break. Because some of these are human, some of these are extraterrestrial. Like the real girls, they were telepathic. Were they human that were enhanced, or were they extraterrestrials? And if so, what species? Where did the Dracos come into this? Were they there with the ships in the 40s, or did they come later? Are they part of the Dracos, part of the reptilians that went underground during previous passes where it wasn't safe? And there's a indigenous reptilian species that's underground, and then there's a extraterrestrial reptilian. So who's in control of this? Which species? Do we have an alliance with the several? I heard we have an alliance with Anunnaki, tall whites, greys, and reptilians, or some kind of agreement. So can you give us kind of the backstory? Like, who are these cast of characters that we're interacting with now to create these new agreements? And then who are the people going to get prosecuted? Who's the bad guys? Is the Queen a bad guy? Those type of things.
Okay, well, those are huge questions. What
right.
I can say is that up until the early 20th century, human history has been dominated by these dark forces and draconian reptilians, the archons, the chimera. They've been in control of banking institutions, of religious institutions, of political institutions. But what happened in the early 20th century was that there was a window where in Germany, with Maria Orsic and her group, and of course with Nikola Tesla and with Guglielmo Marconi, all of those three people, these were either they were Nordics themselves, or they were deeply connected with Nordic extraterrestrials. So each one of them was a major source of this positive Nordic influence that was trying to help break the planet away from this dark control of the kind of reptilian, draconian, chimera, archon influence that goes back thousands of years. So in the early 20th century, there was an intervention by, call it the Nordics, the Galactic Federation, through the use of advanced technologies that would basically offer the opportunity for humans to have face-to-face meetings with human-looking extraterrestrials to help the planet break free of this dark control that had been there for thousands of years. Maria Orsic was the one that really kind of began. Well, Maria Orsic and Tesla and Marconi all began in the early 20th century having communications with extraterrestrials. Tesla and Marconi were doing it through radio communication. Orsic was doing it through telepathy, and each one of them was able to establish connections with these Nordic groups. They were trying to give them information on how to introduce humanity to extraterrestrials. Of course, people laughed at Tesla, people laughed at Marconi, dismissed them when they started talking about extraterrestrials. So Osage basically had a different environment. She was doing this in Germany, in the Weimar Republic, and the German secret societies took her very seriously and began to support her and gave her resources, and so they began to build these real spacecraft, and so they really wanted to establish communications with the Nordic extraterrestrials, and so they were getting help. But then in 1933, Hitler came to power, and he co-opted it, and at some point, like attracts like, so Hitler gets contacted with draconian extraterrestrials that say, well, they're going to help Hitler get more destructive weapons so that he could take over the planet, because they supported his idea of establishing the Aryan master race. So Hitler gets corrupted and signs agreements, or reaches agreements with the draconian reptilian, and so that's when the whole thing started to go dark. And so once Hitler reached these agreements with the draconians, while the Nordics still supported Osage, they realized that she had lost influence, that the German space program...
hold that thought. We're at the commercial break. We'll come back, and so we're going to be talking more about Maria Osage and how she lost control. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here. You haven't answered my question. The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation. Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lessin.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Collision Course is back. Schedule will be on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, and our guest today is Dr. Michael Salla. And before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on revolution.radio and make your donation, because we really need your donations. That helps us stay on the air. Mad Painter, where are we in our fundraising?
Well, if I ever quit coughing on air, it's 22. We need 2250 and we got 2280. That's a balance of 570 we still need, and we only got, 4 days or 3 days? So we really need it.
Come on, everybody. Make your donation. Okay, cool. Okay, so, Sash, you had a request for Dr. Salla to cover something.
Yes, I can speak for myself easily enough. There's two things, Michael, that interest me. First, we were talking about how the CIA had become a power unto itself, run by reptilians ultimately, and Nazis and reptilians. And when we had that so-called false missile attack on Hawaii, that was called, this must have been some mistake, some nonsense like that. It turns out that a lot of evidence that you pointed out were pointing to the CIA owning their own submarine, placing it near North Korea, so that if the president wanted to either let the missile hit and take out Hawaii, or just use the fact that it was fired at Hawaii would be a casus belli and allow him to attack North Korea, so that's more about this covert CIA that, despite all the promises of it being reined in, seems to still be raining on our parades. So that's one thing I wanted to definitely follow up on. If you could say something about that.
Sure. Well, that occurred in January 13 of this year, and of course, people living in Hawaii got an emergency alert saying that a ballistic missile is incoming. Now, of course, the research that I'd done on that, and this was something that I got from a number of different sources. And also people that were familiar with some of the events that have been covered up, some of the groups. But basically what it boils down to was that, as you mentioned, a missile had been launched, a ballistic missile had been launched off the coast of North Korea to frame North Korea in an attack on Hawaii. And so it was a false flag attack. But the missile was shot down. This was what interrupted those that were behind the attack. It was that it was shot down by a secret Air Force space program. And what I found very interesting was that one of the sources that has corroborated that this was a false flag attack has been the QAnon group, and I'm sure your listeners may be familiar with some of that QAnon. Not only did QAnon say that this was a false flag attack, but actually QAnon predicted 6 days before the false flag attack. They made a prediction of a DEFCON 1 situation arising, which would not be real. So this was six days before the missile, or the missile alert. QAnon referred to a DEFCON 1 situation that would not be real, and of course 6 days later, you actually have a DEFCON 1 situation, which was the United States being under impending nuclear attack. That's a DEFCON 1 situation. So then you have one of the situations where a prediction by QAnon turned out to be real. Who was behind the attack? It was actually a CIA fleet of ships, including a nuclear ballistic missile carrier or submarine that launched this. So this is something that I've talked about at length on my website, a whole bunch of articles, and confirmation comes up again and again. And it's interesting that because I've been following QAnon since the beginning now, since November of 2017, QAnon has made repeated references to this ballistic missile attack that what happened in Hawaii, and basically suggesting that this is one of the things that is going to be disclosed, that eventually people are going to learn that Hawaii was actually intended to be the trigger for a third world war, or at least a nuclear war involving the United States, North Korea, and possibly sucking in China and even Russia into that nuclear war. So this was a very serious thing, and thankfully it was preempted by the Air Force secret space program shooting down this ballistic missile launched by this rogue CIA submarine.
Wow. Did you hear about did you see the video about the California Paradise fires? And they had in the clouds was one of the big gray cigar-shaped UFOs. It was very large. It was probably miles across, and it just comes out of the cloud. Very clear about the fire. Was these fires, are they orchestrated in some way people are talking about that.
Right. Well, I haven't put a lot of attention on that particular case, but it's very consistent with what happened in Hawaii very recently with the volcano being triggered, intentionally triggered to create a kind of natural catastrophe in the United States, in Hawaii in particular, generating possibly a tsunami that would devastate the western regions of the United States. Because one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that the United States is a threat to the cabal. That the U.S. military and people who embrace the Constitution and kind of like American firsters, the whole kind of Make America Great Again movement, these are a threat to the deep state because they want to make the United States strong. They don't want the United States to kind of like be absorbed into a new world order. And you can be critical or you can be supportive of that. I'm just trying to describe that this is why these attacks are being organised in the United States by the deep state. So they did it in Hawaii. They've been doing it for years. In California, through a drought, that was basically created through kind of weather modifications where these artificial highs were produced in the Pacific Ocean, just near the coast of California, so that would create a drought that would kind of devastate California agriculture. And so now with the wildfires, again, it's all designed to kind of like weaken California and create chaos in the United States because the United States still has a tremendous power, a tremendous force and vitality. And if the deep state was ever to succeed in creating a one world order, it will only be on their terms, which would be to have a United States which is devastated. And I think that's why the California wildfires have been occurring. And there are telltale signs there of kind of like directed energy weapons being used from these space satellites that are controlled by the deep state. That, just as the deep state brought down the Twin Towers using directed energy weapons and World Trade Center number 7. Similarly, they can use these directed energy weapons to create these fires in California in particular areas. And there are many photos, and you referred to some of these, but what really struck out for me was seeing some of these photos showing these devastated neighborhoods surrounded by green forests. And so you have to ask yourself, how can a wildfire destroy houses and not destroy the forests surrounding the houses? Well, a wildfire couldn't do it, but directed energy weapons could, definitely.
Yeah, Paradise is known as a place where the Venusians, particularly, come in and out. That's one of their portals. And you alluded to that the volcanoes in Hawaii and other places might be deliberately fracked in order to make cavities that get the volcanoes going. Did I read you right?
Well, that's right. Yes. So the Puna geothermal venture that has been. That has been basically, the equivalent, the functional equivalent of fracking. They call it geothermal fracking, and while there's a slight difference in how they kind of drill underground, but basically, they're pouring in the enhanced geothermal drilling. Basically, they're pouring in all of the liquids deep down into the rocks at very high pressures. They're including all sorts of chemicals to the liquid, the steam that is supposedly being recycled. But that goes deep down into the thousands of feet under the ground. And what it does is that it destabilizes the rock structure underneath the Puna region, which is where the Puna geothermal venture was located. And what that did was that basically by weakening the underlying geology, it created a pathway for the lava to flow from the Kilauea volcano. So basically it drained because they had weakened the soil and the geology underneath that region of Puna, just where the Puna geothermal venture is located, they weakened it so much that the lava all flowed down from Kilauea volcano into the Puna region, creating these fissures and this enormous lava outbreak, which broke all records. No other lava outbreak broke all records. So this was an unusual event because there have been lava outbreaks before in the Kapoho region in the 1950s and the 1960s, but nothing on this scale. And you have to ask yourself, well, why was this lava outbreak so much more devastating than the previous one? Well, the difference is that the Puna geothermal venture, through enhanced fracking or enhanced geothermal drilling, as they call it, basically weakened the geology to create a pathway for all the lava to flow out of the Kilauea volcano into this region. And the intent was basically to create earthquakes, and that has been kind of seen, all the earthquakes that was being generated as the lava drained out of Kilauea. But there was a kind of more sinister goal to this, was to destabilize the Helena fault system, especially the Helena slump, which is kind of like this huge pali on the Puna coast, adjacent to the Kilauea volcano. And if a significant enough portion of that broke away, you could have an enormous tsunami being generated that would be like 1,000-foot high, that would engulf the Hawaiian Islands. And by the time that tsunami reached the Pacific West Coast, it would be like 100-foot high, traveling at kind of at about 600 miles an hour. So you can imagine what a 100-foot high tsunami traveling at 600 miles an hour would have done to the Pacific coast of the United States. And the goal of that would have been, as I said before, to basically devastate the United States economically, militarily for decades to come, so that the United States would not be a threat to the plans of the New World Order to move forward and basically create a New World Army where the United States military would basically be integrated, absorbed into this New World Order that would be run by the United Nations.
And, Tompkins I was talking to Tompkins, and there was a point where he was trying to get something across to all of us, and we weren't getting it. And he was like, "You're just not getting it about the reptilians." And so I wish we could have had a further conversation. But he was basically indicating to me that there was some kind of major like that that's going to happen, or that they are terraforming. They're changing our environment. I don't know what their natural environment is, but apparently it's different than ours. Their atmosphere is different. And so what do you know about this? How did the reptilians get in charge? You said it was 6,000 years ago, or the video said 6,000 years ago. What happened at that point, and who was in charge before the reptilians came in and took over?
Okay, well, before the reptilians came into power, you had Atlantis. And so Atlantis was a very advanced civilization, kind of similar to the civilization we have today. Like a post-industrial society with all sorts of advanced technologies. They had their own secret space programs. So a lot of the technology was kept from the general public. But nevertheless, they had developed a kind of like worldwide energy grid, where using pyramid technologies to generate the powerless transmission of electricity. So in some ways, they were more advanced than us. So they didn't have an electrical pyramids that basically generated these standing waves all over the planet, where your transistor, where your car, or your airplane could kind of like be wirelessly powered by this global network of energy. So the Atlanteans had that, but they were basically subverted by by the Chimera, by the Archons, by the Draconian reptilians. And so they were subverted, and eventually when the Atlantean civilization collapsed 13,000 years ago, that's when the Draconians gained their ascendancy. So basically, for the last 13,000 years, the Draconians, with the help of the Archons, have been basically running the show. But prior to that, you had the Atlanteans and kind of like more positive forces running the planet. So now we're on the verge of that kind of turning again. We are going to shift, and we're in the midst of that. We are in the midst of a shifting where our planet shifts from being a dark, reptilian, draconian, Archon-controlled world, where now it's going to be much more a world controlled by the light forces, where individuals have much more sovereignty, where we come into our individual power as sovereign individuals connected to the universe, connected to infinite intelligence, where we can channel all of this, all of the truth, all of the cosmic knowledge directly through ourselves. And so it'll be like a spontaneous awakening for many. So it's not going to be just one person or one organization or one country in control. We're going to have this awakening of humanity where you're going to have millions and millions of sovereign individuals who are going to stand firm in their power. They're going to be anchored to the earth. They're going to be anchored to the sun and be expressing this really powerful knowledge and psychic powers that kind of like equal or transcend even the powers of the military. So this is something we haven't seen for tens of thousands of years, but we are on the verge of that happening again. So even the power of the U.S. military is going to be eclipsed. I think the U.S. military think that, well, kind of once they get the power of the deep state, once they remove the power of the deep state, then, the U.S. military are going to be in the control. No. Gaia is going to go far beyond that.
Yeah, we worked with a lot of experiencers at the conference. We had, 20 or 30 people that came out of the closet and were speaking out about being experiencers. So we have everything going from, dark experiences in the secret space program where they're abducted out of their beds to, people that are ambassadors on ships and they know who they are and they're hybrids, they're extraterrestrials, their souls originate from other spheres of influence. So that's what we had at the conference. And so when I was a child, I was very aligned with Star Trek. And I was so excited when that came forth because until that point, I always thought, who left me on this planet and will they please take me back? So what's going on with the Federation? I've been, as an experiencer, I've been before these huge meetings and they call themselves the Federations. That's been invoked before. Who is this Federation? How are they organized? What's their role in this forthcoming agenda?
Well, very interesting. The Galactic Federation is an association of highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations who for tens of thousands of years have formed these councils where they would basically intervene to help promote the spread and the growth in kind of cosmic knowledge, cosmic awareness, protect especially any world that was in alignment with the values of the Galactic Federation in terms of helping promote cosmic awareness, cosmic oneness. The law of one seems to be a common ingredient of the Galactic Federation, where basically you have this awareness of universal oneness. And so that transcends race, that transcends cultures, that transcends religions, because when you recognize that we are one, it doesn't matter what racial or extraterrestrial group or religious group you come from, it's all about recognizing that oneness. So the Galactic Federation has been kind of like at the forefront of promoting those kinds of values, using advanced technologies, space programs. Some of the people that have been working most closely with the Galactic Federation are those like Alex Collier, who is a good friend of mine, who I've met a few times, and we actually had him over in Hawaii several times to give talks. And Alex spoke at length about one group that was a key part of the Galactic Federation. He called it the Andromedan Council, and basically they were trying to promote this cosmic awareness, trying to expose the corruption and the the kind of like dark activities of groups like the Draconians, of groups like, Greys that are doing abductions and all of these things. So generally speaking, I would say the Galactic Federation is an association of extraterrestrial civilizations that are promoting human freedom and cosmic oneness around the galaxy and universally, and that they have been opposed to all kinds of imperial hierarchical systems, such as the kind of draconian imperial mindset.
Sasha, your turn.
I just love what you said. It was really fascinating, and I feel inspired. Something I'm sort of interested in is the difference between the program of the Admiralty and the program of the Air Force, and how they, are. What I got is that some of them are one of them is kinder than the other. Could you rap about that a bit?
Right. Well, the Air Force, basically, the Air Force was part of the U.S. military-industrial complex that worked most closely with the Greys and the Reptilians and the Germans. So the U.S. Air Force was very heavily involved in all sorts of agreements in order to get technology from these groups. So the Air Force kind of like joined the dark side, if you like, to learn what kind of technologies they had, so that the Air Force could develop the secret space program. And so the Air Force kind of did what they had to do to do that. And many of the things that they've done are dark. I don't want to kind of underestimate that. They've done some pretty dark things. And there was an episode of Cosmic Disclosure where Corey Goode and Emery Smith talked about how the Air Force and the cabal, the deep state, were involved in kind of like interrogating and torturing captured human-looking extraterrestrials. So these are extraterrestrials that are here to promote love and expansion of human consciousness and cosmic unity and so forth. So very kind of peace-loving and human and very kind of uplifting value systems. So these extraterrestrials were being apprehended by the deep state, and the Air Force was playing a role in all of that up until recently, because more recently the Air Force has basically realized that they were tricked, and one of the key things that led to this was the Air Force's realization that the Navy had its own secret space program that was much more advanced than the Air Force. And the reason that the Navy got so far ahead was that the Navy, from the beginning, began working with the human-looking extraterrestrials, with the Nordics, so the Navy kind of kept the distance from the Germans and from the Reptilians and the Grey extraterrestrials, and the Navy concentrated on finding any Nordic extraterrestrial groups that were willing to help the Navy develop advanced technologies and develop a space program that could one day basically help human civilization join the galactic community, join the Galactic Federation. And so a group of human-looking extraterrestrials helped the Navy in this process. And so William Tompkins talked about this. He talked about these human-looking extraterrestrials that infiltrated various companies to help the Navy develop these space groups that would eventually become the backbone of the human or Earth's involvement in the Galactic Federation. And so that's what's happened. So right now, the Navy has developed a very highly advanced secret space program that is working with the Galactic Federation. But this Navy space program is kind of like on the margins of the Earth's power matrix. It doesn't have that much say because the deep state, the cabal, the German secret space program and the Air Force and other groups up until recently have been in control. But that's all changed with the kind of events that Corey Goode has been describing since around 2014, 2015, with this quarantine going into effect, and the kind of Navy secret space program becoming more exposed, and the Air Force learning about this, and the Air Force realizing that it's better for them to work with the Navy, work with the Nordic extraterrestrials, and clean up their act. And so that's what's happened. And so that's why the Air Force actually took a key role and worked with the Navy and worked with the Nordic extraterrestrials and stopped that attack against Hawaii. And so the Air Force now are on the side of the angels, and I think that we're going to have very, very positive disclosures in the future. So, I think we can be really very optimistic that we are going to witness incredible disclosures happening, because those that are resisting the disclosures are fewer and fewer. They're losing their power all the time. And these major institutions like the US Air Force have defected from the deep state. And now they're working with the Nordics. They're working with the Navy, with the Secret Space Program Alliance. And so I think we're going to have really positive changes happening.
Oh, thank you. I like to think that we're more than just a bunch of monkeys on a blue spinning ball, and rather than just thinking of us as sort of this these grubs that might be able to get civilized, I think we're special. I think we have that we are dynamic, inventive, amazing species, and we have a hell of a lot to offer to whoever these other people are too. We don't have to crawl. That's what I think.
Yeah. So what form will this come about? We were playing with that at the conference, like, how are they going to reveal this to humanity? They're worried about people, suiciding. That's of course been a concern for centuries. And I think people will just get over it. They got over it. There's no Santa Claus, right? But what's this look like, this disclosure, when they finally tell us like what's going on? How do you see it coming about, or are you on the inside track of how they're going to do it? How will they do this? Any ideas?
Well, there's a number of levels here. I think politically, the political aspect is going to follow the mass consciousness. What's going to happen is there's going to be a mass awakening where people, it'll be like they just understand the 100 monkey effect goes, 100 monkey effect goes, happens. That basically people wake up one day and realize that, hey, we really are being visited by extraterrestrials. All of these stories about secret space programs is real, and that there is this kind of underlying oneness that undergirds everything. Because the main way in which the cabal, the deep state, has been successful in keeping people in the dark is by manipulating us in terms of, divide and conquer. So you get kind of liberal progressives fighting against, the Trumpers or the Make America Great movement. And so you have all of these kind of manufactured culture clashes, and that keeps communities divided, and so people are fighting against each other. But what's happening behind the scenes is that the foundation has been set for people awakening to this unity, to this oneness that underlies us all. And once people wake up to that, and that is happening, that is spreading very, very quickly. Once people wake up to that, then they're going to understand that we are not alone. Extraterrestrials are here, and that people have been talking about this for decades have been telling the truth, and that they've been unfairly ridiculed and victimized by the mass media. So I think this is what we are going to be witnessing. It's going to be a mass awakening, and people are just going to intuitively get it. This is one of the things I've been watching very closely with Corey Goode, is that Corey Goode, he's not an individual. He is like the fulcrum for an awakening. He is channeling a lot of energy, coming from this kind of, call it the sphere being alliance, call it this kind of cosmic unity, but he is channeling that, through his account. And people listen to Corey Goode, and all of a sudden, while they can't explain it, they realize that what he's saying is true. Even though there's not evidence, the sort of thing people demand, they realize it's true. So, the Corey Goode is in the midst of a phenomenon, and that's why there's been so much pushback, so much kind of negativity thrown his way by many groups.
Okay. So, what's, I'm trying to figure out what's next for Corey, because Corey's been leading this, and there's other people coming out, and what I'd like to see is like everybody come together and connect the dots and put the pieces of the puzzle out there and kind of have at least an inner circle disclosure that we have at these conferences. That was my intention with the conference, to give everybody a voice. And it was just amazing. There were so many, because it was so easy for people to tell their stories, people started telling their stories. It was like almost everybody had something. Everybody had some kind of strange phenomenon, strange encounter. And a lot of people, they felt, it was like me too. They felt like, okay, now I can talk about, I was taken. I was part of the program. It was just an amazing phenomenon, and I'd like to see more of it. So what's the next step to get us enlisted in the process? Instead of it being, somebody that's, it's like we keep putting our power to other people. Like you were saying, that we're going to be individually empowered. How can our listeners, how can people out there come into their own sovereign abilities and wake up, become conscious and empowered, and move out of the role of victim into an empowered individual that can do something about it?
I think it's
any
happening,
ideas?
I think it's just happening by people just learning or wanting to find the truth, being open to the truth and finding it wherever they need to find it, and being awakened to that. And as they do get awakened to the truth, they immediately kind of connect to the cosmic all, or to this kind of this underlying oneness that pervades everything. And as they do that, then they're able to kind of like influence the mass consciousness, so that the mass consciousness gets ready to do away with all of this divisiveness that has been used by the dark forces to basically create conflict and basically keep us all divided for millennia. That as sovereign individuals, as we come into our power, understand that we are kind of like physical embodiments of infinite intelligence residing on Earth, that as we give expression to that through our words, through our deeds, through whatever we do, that we are spreading that energy. So everyone is doing this in their own way. So, you don't have to be a follower of Corey Goode to do it. He's just one source doing it. There are many other ways of doing it. But certainly, I think that's something everyone can do. And we need to be discerning. I mean, there is a kind of like, I think we just can't accept everything. We still have to be discerning, because there are those out there that try to obfuscate and deceive and mislead us. So some people have been influenced in ways that are designed to kind of mislead and confuse. But even there, even people that may have been implanted with false memories, where they're telling stories that they think are real but are really being implanted into them, even they can be instruments for the truth. So even though the dark forces, might implant memories into people, get them to go to conferences and say, hey, this is what happened to me, and a person can be intentionally, with good intentions, be spreading information that may be implanted into them. Even in cases like that, they can be performing a higher service, because they are opening people up to information, and then that's really the important thing.
Sasha.
Yes, I have a few things. I before I was basically asking, or saying, I think that we are special in as much as we have unique lights to shine. And so with a question coming the other way is, what do we have to offer? Now, what we've learned from Randy Kramer and others is that extraterrestrials like our clothes for baby clothes because they're usually bigger, and they like our beer, and they take these gigantic truckloads of the beer all the time. Now, so I know that we have. What we do have to offer is passion, originality, the ability to think out of the box, all kinds of really groovy things. And so I just wonder, what is there more that they value besides our beer and baby clothes?
I'm sorry, Sasha, I didn't quite get that. So what exactly is the question there?
Okay. So different people have said what the extraterrestrials want of the humans that they abduct or that they recruit is they want bodies to cyborg. They want bodies to sell as slaves for sex and sometimes for food. They want people that have technical skills, and they want us. In trade, psychic ability. In trade, they want beer, and they like clothes.
Beer, right? So, like when we end up, apparently, commerce is something that unites different species. We can trade. That's that's something that was conveyed in Star Trek, and it appears to be true, at least from the people that are talking about, what's the value of all this, and that's what keeps the trade routes open, is that people species like to trade, and that seems to be true here on the Earth. People like to trade. So, what is your question, honey? That what value? What do we bring to the table? What does humanity bring to the table?
And not just that we're
trade with us.
Yeah, not just that we're food or body parts, but I think, it's a joke, but I think we're special. And I would like some feedback on what you think about that, Michael.
Okay. Well, I know that extraterrestrials value human creativity, that we, because of our incredible diversity on this planet, are able to create things that is way beyond anything that many extraterrestrial cultures have been able to create themselves. So, for example, music, that's one of the things I remember Alex Collier talking about. He said that the Andromedans kind of really were amazed at the human capacity to create music, because he said for the Andromedan civilization, music is a passive process where, they listen to the music of the spheres and they kind of translate that into in some way, or give expression to that music of the spheres. Whereas humans are able to tap into their own inner creativity to come up with something completely new. And that is something that many extraterrestrial cultures don't have. So I think human creativity is definitely something that many extraterrestrial civilizations highly value. I think the human genome, because we have, again, Alex talked about 22 different extraterrestrial civilizations have intervened in terms of placing their genetics into the human experiment on Earth. And so this is something that is quite unique, because in other civilizations around the galaxy, you have one particular extraterrestrial group, whether it's the Pleiadians or Sirians or the Andromedans. You have the kind of genetics that belong to that particular group, with a little bit of variation depending on race and color and so forth. But on Earth, you have 22 different extraterrestrial civilizations bringing in this incredible diversity of genetics. So that is something that also makes us quite unique. And I think Alex Collier said that the Andromedans basically look at us in awe because we have this incredible diversity. It enables us to do things and to go places that many other extraterrestrials can't, that they don't have that kind of ability. So we can literally open up these stargates, these wormholes into dimensions. We can unlock the hidden mysteries of the builder race technologies that go back millions or even billions of years, that humanity has that ability to do that. And so that's why the extraterrestrials are here en masse, to look at us, to see what we're doing. Are we going to go down the path of establishing a galactic tyranny, which is what Alex Collier said the Andromedans were very worried about? Or are we going to go down the path of establishing basically a renewal or awakening of the Patal, which is basically sovereign, empowered individuals that are in touch with humanity's ancient heritage, in touch with the builder race technologies, in touch with the infinite intelligence that basically guides all life and all events in the multiverses, that is going to be a force for the restoration of order and oneness and all positive values in the universe, that we could go either way. And so this is why we have this incredible balance on the Earth, where you have both the dark forces and the light forces here en masse, watching and trying to influence things. But really, at the end of the day, it's going to be us as a species that decides where we're going to go. Are we going to go down the dark path, or are we going to go down the light path? And what's become clear over the last few years is that collectively we've decided to go down the light path, and the dark forces are fighting desperately to stop that from happening. But they're losing, and very soon we are going to have an awakening on this planet, which is going to be something that is going to be beyond people's wildest dreams.
Yeah, I had somebody tell us on one of our shows that why we're so valuable is because we have the metagene, and the metagene resulted after doing all these experiments. We've been hybridized and mixed and matched with different DNA for many generations by many species, but accidentally this metagene was created, and it basically allows humans to manifest things. You know, it's like magic. We can just like think things into being, and so that's been repressed because they don't want to abuse that. But that's why the governments are looking for people that have this metagene, and because they have extreme abilities like psychic abilities, and they can move things with their mind and all kinds of stuff like that. Have you heard about the metagene?
Well, that's kind of very similar to what Alex Collier was saying about the 22 different extraterrestrial civilizations, basically infusing us with their genetics and trying to create a particular physical receptacle that would be suitable for the energies of the Patal to come through. So that's kind of like another way of expressing this notion that there is within us a kind of metagene, where we could give expression to these abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, time travel, that we are physically, we can become like Jedi. So this is beyond Star Trek. We're talking about Star Wars and the Jedi Knights, that we as this awakened humans, we would be we could establish this kind of like Jedi Knights type culture, where you have these humans that are awakened with these metagenes that can do all sorts of things, and we will be the ones that will ensure order and kind of like justice in the galaxy. It's not going to be done through military might. It's going to be done through those who are in touch with infinite intelligence, that are connected with the knowledge of the ancestors, with the builder races, and are aware of the future of human destiny. And so I think that is where we are going. And so, yeah, I agree that there is a kind of metagene unfolding here.
Okay, Sasha, and we're getting towards the end of the show, so we can start to begin to wrap this up. I want to say one thing. Is there anything else that you want to reveal about this article that you wrote recently, Above Majestic? What was that called? Above Majestic Producer Reveals Secret Space Program. Yeah.
Like my contribution to that was towards the end, where I talked about the importance of mass movements in mobilizing people in getting out there, because this is the only way in which societies change is when people embrace new ideas. So when you have a new idea coming into place, it can overturn institutions and ways of thinking that have been around for thousands of years. So up until the 16th century, the absolute right of kings, the absolute monarchs was something that had been around for thousands of years. People couldn't conceive of this idea of, rule by the people, of democracy, that, absolute kings have been around for thousands of years. But then, within a generation, it was gone. All of a sudden, people had democracy. Similarly with abolition, overturning slavery. Slavery had been around for thousands of years, and so on and so on. And so now, we are now at this kind of like point in our history where we have to overcome this idea of keeping advanced technologies for the benefit of the few under these kind of rubrics of national security. So we have to overcome that and have all of these advanced technologies shared, because it's only when we can share these advanced technologies of, being able to develop, teleportation, being able to develop spacecraft, free energy devices, all of these things. Once these technologies are released, then we as sovereign individuals can step into our true power. Because until we do that, until we release these technologies, if any one of us starts to exhibit these abilities of sovereign power, powers of the Jedi Knights, for example, we are going to be attacked by the deep state and, we'll be assassinated. So in order to bring about a mass awakening for this kind of metagene, for this kind of Patal culture to come into fruition, we have to release all of these advanced technologies. So then the deep state will not be able to stop individuals moving into their sovereign mastery, being able to exhibit these abilities, which are our God-given right to being sovereign individuals on the planet. Which is, this is one of the things Alex Collier again referred to again and again, was that, when we are born on this planet, we are connected to Gaia, we are connected to the sun, and so we are sovereign individuals on this planet. And no one, whether we're talking about extraterrestrials, whether we're talking about the deep state, whether we're talking about archons, whether we're talking about the US military, no one can come in and stop us from exhibiting our God-given right to express our connection to Gaia, to the sun, and all that goes with that expression.
So let's share a little bit about what kind of technologies await us, because we've heard all kinds of things, that we have cures for all diseases and almost physical immortality. What kind of technologies await us with disclosure?
Well, the first ones that will come out will be free energy technologies and alternative health or new healing technologies. So immediately the fossil fuel industry and the pharmaceutical industry will just collapse overnight, because there are technologies for healing, which uses electromagnetics, which is able to use kind of like holographic healing, and uses photonic light healing, which is able to kind of like identify the resonant frequencies in the body and to be able to heal all illnesses. So we're not talking about treatment, we're talking about curing all illnesses. Mm-hmm. So this will be something that is released pretty quickly. That'll be the first wave, along with new energies or alternative, free energy technologies where, we can generate power from a local power generator, kind of like what Tesla had in mind, or through some kind of global standing wave system where we will have wireless TVs, we will have our wireless TVs, our wireless transistor, radios, our wireless phones, won't just be connected to a wireless system to the cloud. They'll be also connected to the power system of the cloud. So right now, your device, your phone, your computer, if you're connected to the cloud, it'll do the same thing. But now rather than your device being connected to a power source at your home, it'll be connected to the power grid in the cloud. So all of our devices will be powered in that way. So that'll be a revolution in itself. And then we're talking about the next wave of technologies where we're talking about, Stargate and teleportation and so forth, and space travel, and that's going to be really exciting as well.
Well, last minute, tell us about your website and how to reach you.
Exopolitics.org. That's where I put up all of my articles. They are made available for free. I have a series of secret space program books, which have been #1 bestsellers on Amazon. So if you haven't had a look at those, then just go to my website, or go to Amazon.com and look under my name. And I want to thank you, Janet and Sasha, for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salla. It's been a delight as usual. Thank you, listeners. Aloha, love, and blessings.
Aloha.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free, but there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.